Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. We have some breaking news coming for the Auburn fans as Devin Williams from Buford, Georgia, has officially made his commitment to the Auburn Tigers program and kind of just carrying on a very strong recruiting run that Hugh Freeze has been on really since he's taken over the job at Auburn. And honestly, I think everyone kind of knew he'd be able to recruit the offensive side of the ball, has done really well with those players, has put a lot of players into the pros, and has always had explosive offenses. I think it's really nice to see, though, that he is equally recruiting that defensive side of the ball, especially in 2025. And I don't want to say that the 2024 class defense was weak. It was obviously really good. Again, maybe the headliners were the Walker White and the other receivers and Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson. But that offense or defense was really, really good in its own right. And I think some of the coaching moves they've made, especially bringing in Charles Kelly, who's an elite recruiter, should really help them carry on, continue to recruit that side of the ball really hard, and be a really deep team and not be like Oklahoma with Lincoln Riley, where you kind of would see their top 10 of their class would all be on one side of the ball, for example. I think Auburn looks like they're really recruiting in a balanced fashion. And if they can continue to do that and Hugh Freeze can get that offense going, I mean, they'll obviously be really, really competitive in that SEC and probably on the national stage. But before we get too deep into Devin Williams, just wanted to thank everyone, especially the Auburn Tigers fans. It's been a blast covering this team since Hugh Freeze has taken over. The optimism, the new hope that you kind of can go back to the highest level of college football. I think it's very much there. The way they're recruiting makes me think they're picking it up or have a very good shot of being there. So yeah, we just really do appreciate everyone following along with us as we kind of talk about this Auburn football program and in the direction it's going. And first, getting into what Devin Williams kind of brings, I think you look at him, not really the biggest corner in the world, obviously at 5'10", 165, 170 pounds or so, but an elite athlete. Really, really quick feet, really, really smooth mover, and does do a good job playing physical and using his arms or hands to get on receivers and not letting them push him around. And I think you kind of look at where he might fit into this Auburn program. And again, you don't know that he might develop if he grows another 2 inches. I mean, you might be looking at more of a boundary-like corner. But if he stays kind of on the smaller side, that's where the nickels play. And you kind of see in this world of college football that nickel's becoming so important because you kind of look, the premier wide receivers like Malik Neighbors, even like a Rome Odunze, for example, those guys will play a fair amount in the slot because teams want to try to get matchups away from that Will Johnson type corner, that number one guy who, again, teams don't want to really throw at. And that's where it becomes really, really important to have a really good nickel who can play man coverage in short areas, play on those really quick receivers. And I think Devin Williams, I should say, really seems to fit that mold in a position of really great importance, as you kind of saw with what Keontae Scott brought to that Auburn team and how important he was to what they were doing. But just to get away a little deeper into what the program and kind of the direction as a whole, I think I really want to talk about what the Charles Kelly hire means to me. I think this Auburn team, you knew, again, as we said, they knew they'd recruit the offensive side. I think bringing in Charles Kelly to be the co-defensive coordinator and then Durkin to be the defensive coordinator, if you will, I think that's a great combo. I think Charles Kelly, probably not the tactician that DJ Durkin is, definitely not known to be the guy calling plays in doing that sort of role in designing the defense. Durkin's great at that, but Charles Kelly can really recruit, and that's kind of an area where I don't think DJ Durkin's necessarily thought to be a total power player. And DJ Durkin maybe doesn't have the charisma, maybe doesn't have the relationships built all through the South that Charles Kelly has. But I think the combination of those two together, where one, DJ Durkin's really been successful at the college football level, designing defenses, putting them in place, in limiting the amount of points teams score, whereas Charles Kelly's just built his career and his reputation on being an absolute alpha dog on the trail, really seems to develop good relationships with players. It's going to be a really good combo, especially as you kind of expect Hugh Freeze to get this offense going with that trio they brought in, led by Walker White, Perry Thompson, and Cam Coleman. I mean, if they can get that rolling, the defense has been good. It was solid last year. I expect it to be solid again, especially with the way they're starting to recruit that position. And one thing I want to note about this 2025 class is you look at where all these guys are coming from. they're all defensive linemen, or at least their top 5. It's littered with that kind of group. And that's kind of a place you kind of look at the depth chart right now of Auburn. It's not super deep up front. They're going to lose a bunch of guys to the draft. Not really guys, though, that were producing at an ultra-high level. I mean, it was a solid unit last year, but not a great unit. You kind of see between the 2024 class and the 2025 class, they're bringing in more of an elite level of defensive linemen. If you hit on a couple of those guys we should very much expect to be high round draft picks. And you get a couple of those, you kind of start turning into that type of Georgia team or some of those really good Alabama teams of 5-10 years ago, where you have multiple first-round defensive linemen. And when you have that in college, you can really be a force. So you kind of look at what they're building in Auburn on that side of the football, especially in the trenches. I think you got to be really, really excited. And kind of to round it out, honestly, I think that fact that Alabama team doesn't have Nick Saban anymore creates a bit of a void down in the South and in how teams recruit, because Nick Saban controlled a lot of talent in that Alabama program. It was the destination spot. I mean, he built up something that we'd really never seen before. And now that he's gone, you got a guy in Kalen DeBoer who you didn't have that heir apparent to Nick Saban where, again, you had any sort of continuity. They're going to a different approach. Kalen DeBoer kind of spent his whole career, if you will, at smaller schools, and he's known as much more of a tactician, but never really recruited at a high level. Even when he had those Washington teams playing really good football, they were never particularly competitive against a team like Oregon, against even a team like USC on the recruiting trail. And that's where it kind of gets interesting is, well, without Nick Saban there at Alabama dominating that kind of region until maybe Georgia kind of came up and started to get really competitive with them in the recruiting rankings, it's going to be interesting to see how that opens up. And for teams like Auburn, for teams like Georgia, for teams like Florida State, even teams that it was really hard to kind of go up against Nick Saban. He was just eating so much talent up in the recruiting world. I think that's going to start spread out a little bit. And frankly, it'll give a team like Auburn under Hugh Freeze and Charles Kelly, especially on the defensive side of the ball, if he should stay there for any length of time, a really good opportunity to start building up a bit of a juggernaut and being kind of the place to be in that recruiting world. And that'll be the interesting thing because, again, Hugh Freeze, I trust that he's going to get the offense going. I don't think he had his quarterback in Peyton Thorne. Next year, who knows what they're going to look like. But at the end of the day, it's going to be about what Walker White does in the future and what those receivers do in the future. And if that offense gets going, I really like where the defense is at. I think it's the culture's in place. I think they're playing really good. They've played really good for a long time now. I think this Auburn team, again, if you've been watching us or following along with us at all, you know we love where this Auburn program is going. And we love it even more now that Nick Saban's gone, because that opens up the state of Alabama. It opens up the SEC West. And we'll see if Auburn can kind of take a stranglehold on that. Look out, because that's a program that, if it's really cooking, I think the sky's the limit for them. I mean, they don't really take a backseat to anyone in terms of like that sort of program. They're no like tier A or tier B in the SEC. I wouldn't think so. Again, I think it's really exciting times on the Plains. I gotta think the Auburn fans are fired up. Another big get in the recruiting world for them. And hey, we'll see. Maybe this influences Jaden Perlott. I know Auburn's been making a push. Guys play at the same high school. It'll be interesting to see what they do. But I think they finish off really good. They keep this defense rolling. Hugh Freeze gets the offense going. You got a dangerous Auburn football program.